What happens when the value in front of x squared is not 1? So what happens when you don't have a simple trinomial? These are called complex trinomials, or for the purpose of this lesson, tricky trinomials. But pretty much whenever the a value is not equal to 1 or 0, you have a complex trinomial and you have to use a different method. Okay, you can't use that shortcut anymore. It's going to start the same where we have to find two numbers that give us a certain product and a certain sum. But now we have to find two numbers that multiply to a times c and still add up to that middle number. So now, if we look at this first example, I have to look at 2 times negative 6. So that's going to give me negative 12. So I need two numbers that multiply to negative 12 and add up to 1. So those two numbers are going to be 4 and negative 3. 4 times negative 3 is negative 12. 4 plus negative 3 is 1. Now what you're going to do is take that middle term. So let me just rewrite it. 2x squared plus x minus 6. We're going to take this middle term and we're going to decompose it. We're going to break it down into the two numbers we came up with. So that's 4x and negative 3x, because 4x minus 3x is x. And then everything else we write around it. So 2x squared and then the minus 6 at the end. I just broke down that middle term. Now what we're going to do is pair them up. So I'm going to pair up my first two terms and I'm going to pair up my second two terms. And then you're going to common factor from each bracket. So for 2x squared and 4x, my common factor would be 2x. From negative 3x and negative 6, I'm going to factor out a negative 3. Remember, if your first term is negative, you have to factor it out. And now, I put my greatest common factor out in front, and when I factor it out from my first pair, 2x squared divided by 2x is x, 4x divided by 2x is 2, close bracket. Then I write my next common factor. If it were positive, I'd write plus 3. Now negative 3x divided by negative 3 is just x. Negative 6 divided by negative 3 is positive 2. And now what you should notice is that each of those brackets is identical, x plus 2. So we're going to factor out that x plus 2 and we're going to write it at the very front. When I take out x plus 2, when I remove this, when I common factor it out from this first pairing, all I'm left with is the 2x. When I cross it out or factor it out from the second pairing, all I'm left with is negative 3. So your final answer would be x plus 2 times 2x minus 3. It's just these coefficients out front, those common factors we originally took out. So, to recap, find the two numbers that multiply to AC and add up to the middle. Once you find them, split the middle term with those magic numbers. Then group or pair them up and common factor from each pairing. And then common factor out that bracket. And now you factored out, or you factored your tricky or your complex trinomial. Notice, unlike simple trinomials, you now have not just an x term in your bracket. It could be 2x, 3x, 4x. It's not going to be as basic as the other ones. So let's try a couple more examples together. So let's look at example 2. 2x squared plus 11x plus 5. So first I want to do 2 times 5. That's 10. So my magic numbers have to multiply to 10, and they have to add up to 11. So what would those numbers be? 5 times 2 doesn't work, but 10 times 1 does. So my numbers are going to be 10 and 1. Don't forget those basics, the times 1. So now I'm going to break off this 11x into those two numbers. So I'm going to write 2x squared plus 10x plus x, or 1x, plus 5. The order you put your magic numbers in does not matter. It will work either way. So now I'm going to pair up my terms and I'm going to common from each one. From 2x squared and 10x, I can factor out a 2, and they both share an x. So 2x. From x and 5, there's nothing I can factor out, but I have to factor something. So I'm just going to factor out a positive 1. So now, put my common factor out in front. 2x squared divided by 2x is just x. 10x divided by 2x is 5. I have to write a common factor for my second pairing, so I'm just going to write plus 1. X divided by 1 is x. 5 divided by 1 is 5. And again, our brackets match. This is going to be your sign that you've done this right so far. The brackets match perfect. If they don't, go back. Find your mistake. So I'm going to factor out my bracket, and then I'm just left with the 2x from here and the positive 1 from the second pairing. And that's it. If you're unsure if you factored your complex trinomial correctly, FOIL. FOIL this binomial multiplication and see if you get your start, if you get that 2x squared plus 11x plus 5. Okay, example 3. 6x squared minus 7x plus 2. Your two numbers have to multiply to 6 times 2, so they have to multiply to 12, and they have to add up to negative 7. So my sum has to be positive, which means both of my numbers will be positive or both of them will be negative. And the sum is negative 7, which means both of my numbers are going to have to be negative. And those magic numbers are going to be negative 4 and negative 3. So that's what I'm going to break down this negative 7x into. So I'm going to write 6x squared minus 4x minus 3x plus 2. If you wanted to write minus 3x and then minus 4x, perfectly fine. Pair them up and common factor. So between 6 and 4, I can take out a 2. Between x squared and x, just an x. Between negative 3 and 2, they don't have a common factor, so I'm just going to take out a negative 1 because that 3 is negative, and that's important. So now I write my greatest common factor out in front. 6x squared divided by 2x is 3x. Negative 4x divided by 2x is negative 2. For my second pair, I take out a negative 1. Negative 3x divided by negative 1 is positive 3x. 2 divided by negative 1 is negative 2. Brackets match. That's a good sign. So I put that common bracket out in front. And what am I left with? 2x from here, negative 1 from here. And there's my complex trinomial all factored. So to recap, find two numbers that multiply to AC, so the outsides, and add up to the middle. Then you can break down that middle term before you pair and common factor 2 times. And that's it. For this page, I want you to try each example on your own. Pause the video, try example 4, and then check your answer with me. And do the same for 5, 6, 7, etc. Okay, so the first one, 4x squared minus 4x minus 3. Before you start, your product is going to have to be negative 12 because 4 times negative 3. And your sum is going to be that middle term, which is negative 4. Okay, pause the video, try example 4 on your own before you check it with me. So for number 4, those magic numbers should have been negative 6 and 2, which you should have broken down right here in the middle, and then common factored. If you chose 2x and then negative 6, that's fine. Your answer should still match mine. I just chose to put it in this order. Okay, I common factored out a 2x and a 1. My brackets matched when I did that, so that was a good sign. Wrote that common bracket in front, and then wrote those two coefficients or terms for my second bracket. Okay, if you made a mistake, check to see where you made your mistake. Were your magic numbers wrong? Did you factor out incorrectly? Okay, example 5. Find two numbers that multiply to 8 times negative 3, so that's negative 24, and add up to 2. Pause the video right here and try it on your own. Okay, so your magic numbers should have been 6 and negative 4. Okay, I knew one of them had to be negative because the product was negative, and I knew my larger number should be positive because the sum was positive. So I broke down that middle 2x into 6x minus 4x, and then I common factored from each. Here I took out a 2x, here I just took out a -1 because they didn't have anything in common, but that first term was negative. And when I common factored, my brackets matched, so I put it out in front, and then I put the terms in front of each bracket, those greatest common factors, in its own separate bracket. Okay, let's go to number 6. Okay, so try this completely on your own, find your own product, find your own sum, and then we'll get back to it. I just wanted to come back on for a second. If you had a hard time with those magic numbers, they should have both been negative because your product had to be positive, but your sum was negative. And those two magic numbers were -3 and -24. So if you weren't able to factor because you couldn't find them, I want you to factor it right now and then play the video after. Okay, so when you broke it down, I put the -3x first. Again, if you went the other way, you should have still ended up with the same answer. So I factored out an x from my first pair and a -6 from my next. I know I did it right because I got 4x minus 3 in each bracket, and I factored that out and put the x minus 6 in its own bracket at the end. Okay, number 7, we have 6x squared minus 7x minus 3. Try it completely on your own, and then check your answer with me. Okay, so my magic numbers were -9 and 2. So I broke down this middle term into -9x plus 2x. I paired up my first two terms and I paired up the last two terms, and I common factored from each. So from the first pair I took out a 3x, and that gave me 2x minus 3 in the brackets when I divided it out. From the next one, I had to factor something out, so I factored a +1, and I was also left with 2x minus 3. Because these brackets matched, I put it out in front, and my second bracket came from the greatest common factors that were in front each one, so 3x plus 1. Okay, 2 more examples. Try number 8 and 9 completely on your own, and then check my answer after. If you're doing a really good job with this, you're getting them right, that's awesome. If you're not, figure out where the problem is. If the problem is with you not being able to find the magic numbers, that goes back to that multiplication table. Okay, you have to be more efficient with it, and you have to find those little clues with the signs. If it's the common factoring, like when you're pairing it up, then go back to common factoring and review that and practice that. Okay, so for number 8, your product should have been -30 and your sum 13. So your numbers were 15 and -2. I broke those down and common factored in each pair. So I factored out a 5x from the first to get x plus 3, and a -2 from the second to get x plus 3 again. So again, that's my sign that I'm on the right track. I put the x plus 3 in front, and then the 5x minus 2 as my second bracket. For example 9, my product was -72 from the 9 and the -8, and the sum was -6. My two numbers were -12 and 6. So I broke those down in the middle, and I common factor out a 3x from here and a 2 from here, which gave me a 3x minus 4 bracket for each pairing. So your final answer was 3x minus 4 times 3x plus 2. Okay, and that's it for the complex trinomial. It is a decomposition method. The name kind of gives it away that you're decomposing the middle term with those two magic numbers. And that's it.